think there's a certain level of vulnerability that you have to offer if you want to have that connection with somebody. And I think connection is what makes you listen because then you're like, oh, well, they're a real person. They're not, this pious creature that's on this stage that's untouchable. And I think so much of us are looking and wanting something more real, something that's like on our level because we're so used to being talked to, right? Like we used to have three
Yep.
news channels and they would talk to you. And I feel like, I mean, I just had a baby, so a lot of my stuff is like in that realm and dealing with doctors and they talk to you. So it's like finding people that will talk with you and well, this is what I did with my kid. Like our pediatrician, like he's very non-traditional. Like he is an MD, like we're not like that far crunchy granola, but he talks to you and you get to make your own decision. I'm like, well, this is more like it. I'm like, I don't want someone in a coat just like telling me this is my only option. So I think we're all looking for a little bit more humanity in everything that we're experiencing.
It happened when my daughter got older. Your kids are very young, but I got to fast forward maybe 12, 15 years. And my daughter came to me and she said, "Dad, why do the girls in school dress, you know, I think the way she put it was like sluts. Their shorts are too short, they're going in spaghetti straps, and this is a public school." She said, "And why do they start drinking? And why do they do?" And I said, "Many of your friends have a problem. Their parents are lying to them about what they did when they were teenagers, about what it was like to grow up. Their parents have tried to project to the children, your friends, that the parents are flawless somehow. But the kids are now old enough to see through that facade. The parents aren't talking about the mistakes and the things that they're ashamed of and whatever their regrets are. And your friends have the same problem you do, which is, how do I grow up? What does it mean? If I'm 15, I'm like, how do I become an adult? What is it? And so they're trying different things. They're trying things that they see other adults do because they can't talk to their parents anymore. You don't have that problem. You can talk to me. You can ask your mom,
Mhm.
what was it like when you were 15? And it is so powerful to be able, I mean, you can't do this with a 3-month old, but as your children mature
Mhm.
to say, when I was 5, or whatever it was, when I went to kindergarten for the first day, these were the things that I was afraid of. These were the surprises that I experienced, and these were the people that I met. And just tell that story, and it could take the nerves. I don't know what your kids are going to feel like when it's time to go to kindergarten, but it's kind of a moment for a parent. And you're saying, well, this is what it was like for me. It requires you to be vulnerable. It requires you to tell stories to your kids that probably you don't want to relive because you were embarrassed by whatever it was that happened in the school cafeteria when you were, in second grade or something. And if you don't deal with those, it comes right back to, it didn't start with you and Mark Wolin. If you don't
Mhm.
deal with those things, then it's like R.A. Dickey says, you might as well tie them up with a bow, put them in a box, and hand them down to your kids to deal with.
I wrote that quote down
So
from one of your
that's a frightening
Substack
thought. Yeah.
articles. No, I think it's
That's great.
incredible, and I think it's something new that a lot of parents are doing, which is really digging deep into our shadows and our traumas and maybe stuff that was handed down to us through epigenetics and and trying to undo that mess so that we can be a better parent and they've done the several studies time and time again, and it's basically any kid that's growing up in an environment that they don't feel safe or supported or nurtured, like, they're not gonna thrive, and you're gonna get a much more dumbed down version of who they could have been. So, there's some times where if you come from a traumatic childhood or you didn't have the best parents and you're trying to undo all of that with your own children, it's almost reparenting yourself. So it can be very emotional because you're like, "Man, I wonder where I would be or who I would be if, if I spilt something, my parent reacted this way, or if when I was potty
Yep.
training, my parents took this approach instead of just, like, reflexive anger," which I think is, like, a lot of Gen X and boomer parents, at least from people that I've talked to, it's just, like, ruling through fear and no explanation. So we try to have a very, very, very different approach, and it's like without all of that trauma, who could you have been? So you can always try to undo it even as an adult, like, it's never too late to start doing that work, but if you are going to have kids, the sooner the better, that way you're not, parenting in a way and showing up in a way that you're not even aware of.
My mother was very crafty, and she made Christmas stockings. She knitted them, out of yarn. So my older sister has one. I have one. My younger sister has one. Mine says Tommy. I don't remember anybody ever calling me Tommy. I don't know what possessed her to put Tommy on the Christmas stocking, because she didn't really call me Tommy. I'm named for my grandfather. Her father, he's Thomas, and I was Thomas or Tom, but on the Christmas stocking it says Tommy, and I still have this stocking. So it's now like 53 years old or something. And Santa knows where it is. So now I say that I have all of these memories and emotions attached to them, and I carry them around with me in my 56-year-old brain, and they're little Tommy. So I've created a character, and I put a school picture of mine from elementary school. I went to school in the 70s, Candace, and you're going to have to forgive. Like, there was some serious fashion mistakes made during school picture time in the 19th. Look up George Clooney, you'll see it. Um, I look horrible in some respects, with my tie-dye t-shirt, my bowl haircut, but I put it up there where I can see it. So I say, I got you. I will never leave you. He will never leave me, and I will never abandon him. But it wasn't until you and I talked earlier, you recommended this book, that I spent a weekend on ancestry.com trying to learn about what types of epigenetically transferred trauma am I carrying around, either from my mother or from my grandparents. What happened to them that could be passed down to me? Turns out that my grandfather, for whom I'm named, Thomas Payson, he was 7 years old when his father, Richard Conant Payson, died. Now, if you're a 7-year-old boy, you've got three older siblings, and your father dies, how do you feel? Do you feel abandoned? And I'm like, so much of my relationships as an adult, romantic relationships, the woman I told you about, so much of them has been formed by this fear of being abandoned, that it has caused me to have what Daniel Amen calls automatic negative thoughts. The fear takes over
Mhm.
my brain, and it constructs a reality that isn't really there, as if I'm being abandoned in real time, when really somebody is trying to reassure me of how important I am to them. And I thought about, I don't know this is the case, but I thought about my grandfather Thomas, my mother, and me, and I found a picture of my grandfather as a little boy. He's probably 5 or 6. Back then, they dressed little boys in dresses or short pants. I mean,
Mhm.
it's a really bizarre kind of fashion statement. And I would rather be wearing a tie-dyed t-shirt, for my school picture, than get dressed up the way they dressed up boys when my grandfather was young. But it's him in his little boy's dress. And I'm like, I got you too. Because if I am carrying around the epigenetic trauma of the loss of the father figure at such a young age, I need that mantra to say, not just because of things that happened to me, I experience thoughts and feelings in this way, but because of things that happened to my grandfather, I will experience thoughts and feelings in this way. What will I do when those come to me? One way of making meaning is to say, I'm insecure. I have an insecure attachment, pattern, or I've read all those books too.
Mhm.
I'm fundamentally flawed. I'm unlovable. No, no, no. It's all her fault. She's unreliable. I can tell myself a million stories, because stories are how we make meaning. And one of the stories that I can tell is, because of something that happened to my grandfather that is out of his control, and because the way epigenetic modification of DNA works, I have inherited not experiences, but automatic um, thoughts and feelings that are intended to protect me from things that happened to him. Okay. With that meaning, I'm armed. I'm empowered to go through my life
Mhm.
and say, he's okay. Got it. I'm never leaving him. I'm never leaving little Tommy. And it is all right. If other people make their choices, they might leave me, but I'm going to carry these two around with me. everywhere I go. And someday, maybe I'll meet them in the afterlife or some other dimension of consciousness, and they might come up to me, like in my imagination, they might say, "Hey, thanks, I felt that," or they might say, "What were you doing all
Mm.
that time?" And I'll say, "Well, I was taking care of myself."